MysteryWire.com, home of the unusual and unknown. From Area 51 to the paranormal, it's your source to the most vetted UFO stories and special investigations in the world. Take a journey into the universe of MysteryWire.com.
Well, we're back now with George Knapp again. I'm Duncan Phoenix, producer of Mystery Wire. It's been a very interesting week or so in the Mystery Wire world. A lot has happened in this week. We've had some expected things come about and some unexpected things come about. George, what's been going on?
Well, you know, there's never a slow week in UFO news anymore these days. It's a good time to have Mystery Wire around, giving ourselves
Definitely.
a plug. There was one development that happened that we're going to share with the world now that we've been chasing for a long time, Duncan, you and I, and Matt
Right.
Adams, and that's Marco Rubio. Senator Marco Rubio earlier this year became chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and we've heard bits and pieces of information about that committee over the last 2.5 years, having closed-door briefings about UFOs, UAPs. The Pentagon has been bringing these naval aviators over, people like Dave Fravor and some of his colleagues. The folks from TTSA have been in on some of these closed-door briefings. The New York Times recently did a story about these briefings and the discussions of crashed saucers, things of that sort, that have been shared with Senate staffers and elected officials. And of course, Rubio has made some public statements about UFO research, that he supports the idea that there's a UAP task force, that he thinks we need to get to the bottom of it. And there was one journalist who got an interview with him, a Florida journalist. So we've been trying to get Rubio on camera for a while. And we got a colleague of ours from Nexstar, which owns our station, Kelly Meyer. Kelly Meyer's a DC-based reporter who works with us, our colleague, and we had planted this idea in her head months ago. And she finally tracked him down. She was really diligent about it and tracked him down. And we shared with Kelly a bunch of ideas about questions that she could ask, and she did. She put them to him, and we got him. And we're not quite ready to reveal the whole thing, but we got a piece of it. And maybe you want to say something about it as we go into it.
Yeah, one of the things that caught everyone's attention earlier this year was Senator Rubio slipping into the intelligence funding bill, the request for money for the UAP task force, which, as the DOD has confirmed, is out there, at least at this point. And so one of our questions to Senator Rubio is this really just his effort? We know in the past Senator Reid has wanted this, but is Senator Rubio, who can be a very polarizing figure on the Hill, is this a partisan issue? And here's what he had to say.
Is there bipartisan support for a formal investigation of UAP, and are your colleagues on Intel as supportive of the task force as you are?
Yeah, I think it's certainly not a partisan issue. I think there's different levels of interest in it. Obviously, look, I mean, the stigma, it starts out with the fact that a lot of pilots for a long time wouldn't even report on these things because they were told, no, you need to go see the flight surgeon to check your head, so people just decided, they're going to think I'm crazy. I'm not going to report on it. And I think some of that seeps into the politics. I mean, no one ever wants to be accused of being a person that's out there sort of chasing these things that have been the realm of science fiction for such a long time.
Well, not really science fiction anymore. This is in the hands of the government. Now, you believe them or not, but the government's talking about it, the senators, in fact, and Department of Defense to an extent. Right, George?
Yeah, I mean, Senator Rubio is being careful here. He is careful to say this is not about aliens. We're not chasing ETs. That mirrors comments that were made by Senator Harry Reid, by the way, who said the same thing right from the beginning when he got the funding for ATIP, what became ATIP. It was OSAP in the beginning, a study by the DIA looking into not only UFOs, UAPs, but a broader range of phenomena associated with that. He said, look, I'm not chasing little green men, as he said many times since. We're not looking for little green men. We're trying to figure out what it is that's flying around in our airspace. And he said, as Rubio has said, we need to find this out. We need to know who this is. We know that the Russians and Chinese are trying to find out the same information. We need to get it before they do, figure out this technology. That is one level of the interest that justifies the Intelligence and Armed Services Committees looking into this, the national security implications. And And Rubio has smartly used that to provide sort of political cover for his support for these investigations by the Pentagon. I think that's smart. It's smart politically, and it's smart from a national security perspective. Nobody wants to be the UFO alien senator any more than anybody wants to be the UFO reporter or podcaster or website manager. So it's smart of him to say there are legitimate reasons for us to go after this. And in the interview that we did, that Kelly did for us, he gets into that in greater detail. You know, we reported it before on Mystery Wire, the cases of UFOs hovering over nuclear missile facilities and messing with launch control codes, things of that sort. Those are real. Those cases are real. Our government, and some of the documents we posted on our website, our government and military, long before the Freedom of Information Act existed, were more open in discussing this behind closed doors. They had memos where they discussed it, and they said, these are not ours, these are not Russians, we don't know where they're from. The possibility is they're from somewhere else, and we need to look into it. And of course, that has been the driving force behind the government studies all the way along, you know. And there's aircraft safety that Senator Rubio gets into in the interview where, hey, what if one of our F-35s crashes into one of these things? Because there have been near misses, you know. It's a violation of our airspace to have these things flying over our military facilities, our military bases, our nuclear facilities and nuclear power plants. And we need to find out. You don't have to be crazy or interested in ET to want to get to the bottom of that. So I think he's staked out some good solid ground here that gives him political cover as a reason to pursue the story and the investigation. And we'll be posting that full interview, Duncan, I think in a couple of days, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So watch for that. And that was just about 45 seconds of Rubio. We've got 5-6 minutes of it. So it's some good stuff. The other thing, let's go from politics to rock and roll, kind of. The other thing that came out this past week was a small little article in rollingstone.com, Rolling Stone magazine online. And by small and little, I mean 10,000 words, which is big. And George, you made it into this article. Tell us a little bit about, this is the author, Stephen Rodrick. He's been around for a while, and you had a chance to really spend some time with him and have been looking forward to seeing what he's come up with for quite a few months now.
Well, I've always wanted to be on the cover of Rolling Stone, but my musical skills are not going to allow that to happen, I don't think, since I have none. So this is the closest thing. Stephen had reached out to me almost exactly a year ago. Rolling Stone sent him on assignment to cover that whole mess up there in the desert where supposedly 1 million people were going to show up and storm the base. They can't keep us all out. Rolling Stone figured that'd be a good assignment for Stephen, so they sent him out. He came out to Jeremy Corbell and introduced him to me, and Jeremy had an RV out there parked next to ours, the Channel 8 I-Team RV, and we were doing reporting from the scene, and Stephen Rodrick stayed with Jeremy and sort of soaked it all in, was going to write an article. And I think it was kind of an open to him to report on that event, which was, of course, as we know, pretty wacky. People remember being acting crazy and to enter a top secret national security facility. It was all basically good, clean fun. It started as a joke. People went out there to party and have fun and be goofy. And so, you know, I was kind of worried about it with Stephen going out there, a major paper. Rolling Stone does some good investigative stuff. It covers cultural stories and political stories way beyond just rock and roll. And I looked up him, remember the name with me, Stephen Rodrick. Yeah, I remember him. He was the guy who wrote an in-depth piece about Johnny Depp, the actor. A troubling time in Johnny Depp's career and personal life. And maybe you remember seeing that, Duncan.
I remember the stories behind it. That did a number on Mr. Depp.
Well, it was brutal. So I'm thinking, oh man, I hope that this guy's not a hitman sent by Rolling Stone to go after UFOs. And it turned out he was a very likable guy and a very curious guy, and clearly is an excellent writer. He ended up not just writing a piece about Storm 51. He spent the next 11 months off and on working on a much broader story about UFOs, current conditions, I introduced him to a number of people, one of whom was Harry Reid. I vouched for him with the To the Stars guys, To the Stars Academy, Tom DeLonge, Elizondo, Chris Mellon, and those guys. And then he went off and talked to the debunkers. And, this article came out this week, 10,000 words. There were some problems with it at the beginning. There were several factual errors that they corrected. Sadly, the piece, as good as it is, and there's some great writing in it, some really great stuff. Sadly, it is not going to be in the magazine form. It's only going to be online because it's too long. So I've had some exchanges with Stephen privately after the piece came out, in which I expressed my reactions. And then we decided to have a public discussion with him. He agreed to come on our podcast. So we talked to him about the article, how he put it together, what his impressions were, and how he arrived at some of the conclusions in this piece. So here we go.
What was the assignment when you were given this job? What would they tell you to do, and what was your reaction to the assignment?
Well, I was talking with my editor. His name is Sean Woods at Rolling Stone, and we usually have kind of a go back and forth over an idea, and we'd both, read a little bit about the Area 51 event, which was sort of the original, or not the original idea, but the original germ of not just the gathering, but just it seemed to be kind of a culmination of the multiple History Channel shows, the New York Times revelations, which were sort of kind of mid-revelation around that time, like September of last year. And it was sort of like, what is an angle to tell this through? Because even at 10,000 words, which the story ran at, as you know, I skimmed the surface even at 10,000 words. So we were trying to think of a way into the story that would be manageable in terms of it being a feature story. And one of the ways, it started as, okay, just go to the event, see what you see, and then we'll reconvene. And one of the things I did as research for going out there is I watched Jeremy Corbell's films and his Bob Lazar film, and reached out to him, and he said, yeah, come on out. And as he told me later, he thought we were just doing a phone interview when I was actually just trying to find out where his RV was going to be parked. So I could meet him. He's like, oh, you're coming out. Great. And as you know, Jeremy is a feisty figure, a larger than life figure. And with these kind of stories, it often helps to have someone like that, if not to be the main focus, to be kind of a guide who you come back to a few times. So I think it just was a culmination. It was that event, but as you know, this moving toward whatever you want to call it, or anybody else wants to call it, in terms of disclosure, or the government being more open about what they're looking into or what they have found. It seemed that we'd reached, and I mean the country had reached kind of a critical mass on this, and that kind of is what got us started.
Yeah, it's a UFOs in the zeitgeist or the moment.
Exactly.
It's everywhere. And then, the Storm Area 51, which started as a joke and then evolved into this alien, wacky Woodstock kind of a thing. That's a great starting point for a story for you.
Right. And I would say sometimes, let me just make a comparison, is that while a lot of people like the story, some people had mixed feelings about it. Some people didn't like the story. And the only, not explanation, but kind of an explanation I can make is that it's much like I did a profile of Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, and the Canadian readers were like, oh, you missed this, or you covered this already, that's already been covered to death. And all I could say to that, and which kind of carries over to this story, is I'm writing it for a general interest audience who may, flipping through the channels, have caught 5 minutes of the History Channel, or a headline or something like that. So part of the challenge is to write something that's not for grade one, but also is for the general reader rather than the people who
At school. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
You know, so some of the tone, I know some of the feedback I've had is the same that I've had to my stories, is the tone is, well, it's shooting fish in a barrel. Hunter S. Thompson making fun of UFO wacky people wearing goofy hats, which is easy enough to do, and I have done it.
Right.
I always felt that you had to acknowledge the wackiness factor as a starting point, so you get beyond it. If you want to take it seriously, you have to acknowledge that that part of it comes with the territory.
Sure. No, and I agree. And the difficulty is with this kind of movement, or any kind of movement, is someone like me goes to this gathering and I see what I see, and I won't deny there's a little bit of, I guess I put it, unintentional shooting fish in the barrel. Because if you go and the guy's doing, as you know, Paul Oakenfold's doing his DJ set as one of the things happen, and there are a bunch of people dancing around in alien outfits, and it is supposed to be this kind of, whether the meme was a joke, it became taken somewhat seriously, that you mixing my metaphors here, I almost feel like you have to shoot some of the fish in the barrel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like the main illustration, the main graphic for the story. I don't know if I would have done it exactly that way, but it was very, to the general reader, again, not the people who are part of the community. They're like, well, that kind of really drew me in. So again, it's a push and pull.
It's a long interview, though. I mean, the longest article you've ever written, I guess, for the magazine.
Yes.
And still, you could have gone further. Was there any discussion about taking it further, turning it into something else?
No, actually, I mean, only in the sense, the reason it was able to run so long is, unless it's a story on, profile of a president, or, an interview with Obama when he was in office, that's just, that length, it strains the editorial space that's available. So the reason it was able to run that long is that we decided to run it as what they call digital long form digital only. So if we had to squeeze that into a magazine, or any magazine other than maybe the New Yorker, which seems one of the few magazines impervious to what's going on in the economy, we would have to cut it in half. And then a lot of the concerns, including on my end, would have been like, okay, well, you've truncated everything, and you've simplified everything that you wrote in 1,000 words into 200 words. So
so you do have to shoot a couple of fish in that barrel. You do have to describe the scene as it was.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of wacky characters associated with the subject matter.
Sure.
Once you get beyond that, though, there is at least a level or a kernel or two of interesting information that kind of tends to get lost in the 10,000 word shuffle here.
Sure.
So talk to me about that part of it. You note that in the article, you come from a Navy family. You note that Dave Fravor and those folks who gave testimony to Congress. What did you think about those encounters, the legitimacy of those encounters, and whether there's an actual mystery involved here?
Well, see, so that gets to the crux of many of the issues, which, becomes a simplistic thing that you can reduce it to whether one person, in this case me, who wrote the article, thinks it's possible, and whether or not I know for sure it happened, depending on what you want to get into. I know that, there's people I quoted who cast some doubt on their stories, which I thought was a credible response. I mean, some people, I've pointed out that the people that I've quoted have their own kind of skin in the game, and they have, their own interest in this unfolding in a way that benefits them, and I won't deny that. But I thought it was compelling. I still don't have any idea if it's true or false. I think everybody involved are completely honest and forthright on what they saw and what they think they saw. And I tried to portray that along, though, with, okay, here are some skeptics who think, just because someone is trained to recognize other aircraft, whether it's a Soviet fighter or a Chinese bomber or something like that, doesn't mean they can be conclusive on something they've never seen before. So,
Well,
if we leave it at just, I saw something that did not look like an airplane or an aircraft I've ever come into contact with, then that's fine. You know what I mean?
Well, Dave Fravor said it's more advanced than anything that is known to exist in our inventory.
Sure.
Our Pentagon has issued a statement now. They've had those videos for a number of years, have analyzed them, and so they are truly unidentified. They presented that information to the U.S. Congress. We interviewed Marco Rubio yesterday, who said,
Yeah.
look, if this was an advanced plane, we wouldn't be here talking about it.
Right.
It's unknown. It's unidentified.
Right. Right.
That seems, and I don't know how many you need to be a legitimate mystery. I'd say you need one, you know. So that's why I was wondering whether you had given a fair shake to that kind of information.
Well, I guess
that.
Yeah, I guess I would say, I thought, you know, by describing what he saw and talking to another pilot, that I gave it a fair shake, and I also, presented some of the, I guess you would say, extreme skeptics.
How did you settle on Seth Shostak, who has not studied UFO cases other than he gets asked about it all the time? You know, he gets asked about it. He has a, you know, and for him to say there's a dearth of evidence is supremely ironic in that, you know, he mentions about UFO people like believing in Santa Claus. He believes there are aliens out there and that we will intercept their radio signals one day. We have no radio signals. We have no evidence that aliens are out there. Why isn't he a believer?
Say that again. Why isn't he a?
Well, I mean, he's talking about belief. You know, people, yeah. UFO people, he compares them to believing in Santa Claus, whereas he's looking for evidence. He has no evidence, zero evidence. He believes aliens are out there. He believes we will one day intercept a radio signal, and has not one shred of evidence for any of that.
Well, I guess I would say, and I believe me, I'm, you know, not a defender of his, but I think what he was saying about the Santa Claus thing was that we want so hard to believe that there's a reason we're all here, and that led to that part he was talking about. In terms of the other stuff, I think you make a legitimate point that it's not like, you know, he's in the business of saying we're going to find something, but we have not found anything, and also please fund me with more money. So I think that's legitimate. I don't think, though, that dissuades or takes or dismisses him as someone, you know, credible to comment on, you know, whether or not these Navy pilots are qualified to make the jump to, okay, we saw something that we've never seen before, to, you know, we've seen, you know, a UAP or something like that. So,
well, it is, strictly speaking, a UAP. It's unidentified.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I misspoke there. Yeah.
But you don't have Dave Fravor saying they're aliens. He just says we don't have something like this.
Yeah.
Whereas Seth Shostak feels very comfortable in commenting on Dave Fravor's ability to make those kinds of a judgment.
Right.
What about TTSA? What was your take on that outfit?
This is always damning with faint praise, but I found them all to be very interesting, welcoming, incredibly nice people. This is where you always put the comma. You know, I think that Tom DeLonge has you know, left the organization open to credibility issues with some of his more outlandish statements through the years. And, you know, one of the things I talked about, something I know that you know about, is these metals that they've been testing. And, you know, as far as I can tell from when they announced they had bought these metals, and, you know, they could be this, they could be that, and now it's 6 or 8 months later and we've heard nothing. I think it's important to remember that it was TTSA was started as an entertainment company, and I think that the fact that it was started as an entertainment company still kind of colors a lot of things they do. I think that much, not, you know, I don't want to get into like a shot by shot review of their television show, but as I mentioned in the story, there was a couple just kind of like iffy reality TV moments in their show that makes me feel that you are somewhat, I don't know if compromise is the right word, but you are trying to serve two masters when you're trying to do entertainment and research. And if you're trying to get ratings, you want to juice up stuff, understandably. And if you're trying to do purely research, you'd be like, you're very, very judicious on what you release or what we think this means or whatever. So I just think that, you know, on one hand, having someone that kind of prominent and charismatic does wonder for, you know, the culture and people getting interested in this. But if you also have someone that charismatic who's also has a proclivity, not as much now as he used to go into the weeds about, you know, spaceships being built in Argentina by exiled Nazi scientists and stuff like that, well, then you're going to have credibility issues from the skeptics who are going to be like, oh, they're going to ignore like 80% of the good stuff that Lou or Mellon or someone is doing. They're going to center it, or they're going to focus in on, here's that guy who thinks that there's spaceships in Argentina that were built by Germans.
Right.
Let
me ask you about Jeremy, because I have had sort of a backseat view, or a fly on the wall view to your banter with him over the last 11 months. Did you enjoy that conversation? And what's been his reaction to what you wrote?
Well, I can only tell you that his mother said that she loved it, and that he said that he loved it after he read it. So, which I may have mentioned this to you in a previous conversation, is that you can never, and you've probably had this experience with your work, you can never, or rare, sometimes it's hard to predict how people are going to react to a story. I've done stories which I thought bent over backwards and showed sort of like my fawning admiration for somebody, and then they pick out one thing they did not like, and then they blacklist you forever. And other stories where I've made someone look like kind of a rapscallion, and they're like, oh, I love that. I've been sending that out to copies to everybody. So
well, I just officially, I like being John the Baptist of UFO.
Good. So I think Jeremy, I think Jeremy liked it. I found him to be a very, very interesting character. I worried sometimes of his what do I want to call it, professional life balance. That's getting texts from him at 2 o'clock in the morning about, hey, look into this and stuff like that. And there became moments where I'm working on other stories in this 6 or 7 months between when we finished spending time together when the story came out, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm like, Jeremy, I just can't get to this right now. I've got other responsibilities or whatever. But his passion is beyond compare. There's few people that I've written about in the 30 years or 25 years that I've been doing this, whose passion for whatever they do is as great as his.
Tell me about reactions so far from the Rolling Stone, your regular readership. Have you had an influx of readers for this article? Have you got a good reaction from the general public, and then also reaction from your editor and colleagues?
My editor and colleagues have been, I literally have, and I didn't even tell them I was doing this podcast, was like, hey, can you send me some of the emails you're getting? We're just curious to see how people are liking it or not liking it. And we're getting, from our general readers, it's got a lot of people clicked on it, and one of the things they do is, and I do not have any idea how they do this, is how long someone stays on a click or something, and they're saying people are spending a lot of time with it. One of the things I'm getting, both as a criticism and as a compliment, is the Hunter S. Thompson thing. And I got to tell you, and I'll whisper this, is that I'm not a huge Hunter S. Thompson fan. And I'd like to think my story is exponentially more factual than a lot of his stories. Let's just leave it at that. That whatever issues people have with it, there are no invented scenes or legendary tales or I snuck into Roswell or something that didn't happen. So, but at the same point, Jeremy put kind of a general tweet on Twitter saying, "It's like, what do you think of the story?" And I didn't count it up, but I'd say that it's kind of like half liked it and half said, as you said, is a little bit of shooting fish in the barrel, and there was an opportunity missed to really get into the depth of where we are now versus where we were 20 years ago, and also this reads like bad Hunter S. Thompson. So yeah, there definitely was mixed feelings, which is, I never want someone not to like a story of mine, but it shows that you've hit a nerve of some sort.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a valuable endeavor because Rolling Stone readers don't generally read UFO stuff. So you've reached another audience for this, and some of those people who read it are going to be interested. Some probably didn't make it all the way through 10,000 words.
Yeah, and I'll add this is that, and this I've gotten from people who loved it, were kind of in the middle, and people hated on it, who said, what you need to do to really get to the bottom of this is write a book.
Yeah.
so
you and everybody else.
I know. It's just like, I'm going to let that sit there for a couple weeks. But and also, I mean, there's, the backdrop of this, and this is just maybe more among, readers who are agnostic on the UFO thing, is a lot of them were just excited to read a story from the pre-pandemic time when a writer could go out, travel the country, talk to a bunch of people, go to a festival or something. And, I mean, I went to, I don't know if, I'm sure you've heard of it at least. I went to a UFO stand in Hooper, Colorado, for the story where there's supposed to have been a lot of sightings and stuff like that. And that stuff didn't even make it into the story. So that shows how kind of, how far and wide I traveled. And I think a lot of people were just, I don't know if hungry or just grateful to read a story of something that wasn't just done by a series of Zoom calls. Was this actually someone, whether you liked the story or not, but was actually someone who, drove to Vegas, saw you, drove back to Jeremy's undisclosed desert town, and again, whether you liked it or not, I had the privilege and ability to do the legwork that we just can't do right now in any aspect of reporting.
Well, I hope you're hooked on the topic at least a little bit, Stephen, and I hope if you do decide to head down that road again, that you give me a call.
I definitely will.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
So if you haven't seen the article, I mean, I've got a printout of it, and it's got this crazy, colorful alien imagery that leads into the piece. It's called "Loving the Alien: How UFO Culture Took Over America." And of course, we do get mentioned, and Tom DeLonge and Harry Reid and some of the people that we've come to know covering this. And it's a brilliant piece. I mean, it's very funny. There's some very laugh out loud sort of observations about Stephen as he's finding his way through this weird world of UFOs. And some of them are spot on. I think it's absolutely fair for him to go ahead and take some obvious pot shots at UFO culture. It is much deserved. But it really seems kind of cheapo to me in a sense, because making fun of UFO aficionados, it's a tried and true media approach. Hundreds of writers have sort of parachuted into the subject, and this is exactly what they've all done. Mm-hmm. We'll find out people with funny hats and how ridiculous they are, and I'll write a really funny piece that destroys them. And that's happened many times, many more times than I can count since I've been covering this, and it will happen many more times. People, I guess, think that that's a really original approach to take, but it's not. It's, the wackiness is an integral part of the culture and community of ufology. You can't ignore it if you're going to take this on. So, he
didn't. He anchored his story on Storm Area 51, really, and as we all saw, there was wacky. There was there was nutso
Yes,
up there.
certainly is fair, and you have to cover that. You can't ignore it. It would
Right.
be dishonest to ignore it. The problem is for journalists of all stripes that have covered this before, and I've done that same stuff, by the way, in my original UFO stories. You have to take it on. Is that most journalists never get beyond it. They make up their minds right then and there. Oh, these people are crazy. The true believers are crazy. And then they go and find ways to justify the assumptions that they are making, which is, I think, to some extent is what Stephen did. Now, he cast a wide net. He talked to a lot of different people, but the people that he ended up citing on are the debunkers. And, you know, I don't know how many times in the last 3 years I've seen Seth Shostak interviewed as the authority on the other side of the UFO question, but it just seems to me to be lazy because Seth Shostak doesn't know squat about UFOs. He hasn't read the documents, he hasn't studied the cases, he dismisses it with a wave of his hand in the kind of quotes that are in this article, loving the alien and comparing it to people who believe in Santa Claus, yuck, 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 as if that's never happened before. And I think it's really interesting for Shostak to say that UFO investigators are based on belief systems, when in fact SETI, the program that he's worked for 20 plus years, has been in operation for decades, has spent tens of millions of dollars
in taxpayer money sometimes.
It's taxpayer money in the beginning and now privately donated money, but it's all based on the idea that we're going to aim our radio telescopes out there and pick up radio signals from other planets, because we believe that they are out there. If there's anybody who believes, it's the SETI people. We believe there's aliens out there. We believe that they use radio signals, and we're going to be able to detect them using these giant telescopes and radio telescopes and dishes. In all those years and all those tens of millions of dollars, there is not one single radio signal, not one shred of evidence that SETI is based on science. So for him to say there's a dearth of evidence with UFOs is laughable. And I don't know if he has no sense of irony at all, but it seems to me that he should turn the mirror around to himself. I mean, if UFO evidence is taken seriously, and it is being taken seriously now by the Senate, by the Pentagon, researching this, that prospect must shoot like an electric signal into Seth Shostak's heart and into his wallet. Because if in fact we get confirmable evidence that it's real, and I think we've got some, the sensor signals and pilot testimony and the videos, things of that sort, that makes SETI look pretty insignificant by comparison. And I'm sure that he sees it as an existential threat to SETI to have so many people, serious people, interested in UFOs. So going to Seth Shostak to get an opinion about UFO culture is like asking McDonald's to review Burger King's fries. I mean, he has a vested interest in demeaning that and dismissing it. And he did it again in this article. And I had expected more from Stephen Rodrick. I expected more from Rolling Stone. It just seemed like a really cheap, easy way out, you know? And so I was kind of disappointed in that. That said, it's a well-written article. It's 10,000 words. Rolling Stone's a great magazine. And it's, I think the article will reach a bigger audience than has ever been exposed to this UFO stuff before. And a lot of those people are going to read it, are going to stick around and dig into it and want to have more information. And that's a good thing.
And one of the things that we've noticed, at least I've noticed on the back end of Mystery Wire, is that it has pushed a little bit of a new audience onto our site, and I'm sure others too, looking for information. That's one thing that we have a lot of on Mystery Wire. We've got, you know, if you're wondering what we're talking about with these videos, the Navy jets, Dave Fravor, we have all that on Mystery Wire, the Tic Tac video, the gimbal, the Go Fast. We have all that. We've got their testimony. We've got the documents. And like you said, this is being talked about openly in the government now. I'm coming at this from a very skeptical journalistic point of view. And I still find it just remarkable that the government, love them or hate them, they're openly talking about this. Now, as a journalist, either there's a story there that it's all fake and the government's just doing their charade again, good story, or it's all real, or somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, again, it doesn't have to be aliens. The answer
Right.
doesn't have to be aliens. We don't know. The Pentagon, I think, in my heart, I believe that they do not know for sure. I'm sure there are people working in that study that's ongoing now who suspect that it's from somewhere else, from out there, dimensional time travelers, whatever. The fact is, they don't really know. They'd like to know. And so when you have Navy pilots as qualified as Dave Fravor, commander of the Black Aces, who chased the Tic Tac and countered it, and all of his colleagues in the Navy who are manning these sensors, and the other pilots who saw it and filmed it, and them having the opinion that this is not ours. It's not a bird, it's not a flare, it's not a plane that we have. It's like no technology we have. It's not a drone, it's not ours. And then somebody like Seth Shostak quoted in the Rolling Stone article saying, Dave Fravor and those guys, they don't know what an alien looks like, so therefore their judgment is no good. I tell you, you know, it'd be like Dave Fravor telling Seth Shostak and his astronomer buddies they're completely wrong about Neptune, that what they're actually seeing in their telescopes is Uranus. You know, Dave is not qualified to make that determination, and Shostak isn't qualified to tell Navy pilots what they did or did not see. They don't claim they saw aliens. They say they saw craft that it was beyond anything we had. So that was the problem I had with Loving the Alien and Stephen Rodrick's piece. I recommend it. He's a great writer and a good guy, and I hope that we have helped interest him in this enough to where he'll come back and take another look at it and speak to people who know more about it than Seth Shostak does.
I think it will, and again, fingers crossed, as you've been doing for many years. Hope this kind of changes the tide on things. So be on the lookout for more from Marco Rubio coming up next week, depending on when you're listening to this. This is we're recording this on Thursday the 27th, so next week at the end of August, beginning of September, we'll have the rest of Senator Rubio's interview out. It's something to look forward to. George, thank you for taking some time to talk about this, and everyone, we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
All right.
I think